What an incredible season this is. To remember the greatest and to recall the greatest event in human history when God put on flesh and was born of a virgin, all for the purpose of our salvation. You know, as we look at the thrill of hope, I want to focus specifically regarding the invitation and how God called people to that moment, the greatest event in human history, and to be able to look through Matthew chapter 2 and Luke chapter 2 to see who was invited to the event. And you may know that whoever, we invite to a party or whoever is invited to a party says a lot about the person inviting them. And I think that we're going to be able, as we look through these two different passages and see two different groups, or three ultimately different groups, I think we're going to learn a lot about God in this. And I think who He invited, who He wanted to be at that very sacred moment, I think is going to tell us a lot about Him. But specifically, when we look at these people that had a specific invitation by God to be at this sacred moment, I think it causes us to scratch our heads a little bit, because this is a really interesting guest list, to say the least. These are people that, for the most part, nobody else would have invited, and to be honest, nobody else would have thought to invite, to be quite frank about it. So to find these groups at this sacred event of the birth of Jesus is mind-boggling. And if you think in terms of our own life, I mean, isn't that one of the challenges we have with God in our relationship with Him? And it's that He doesn't work like we think He should work. His view of what should be done and my view of what should be done sometimes are very different views. And yet His is right, and I understand that. I mean, we remember the words of the prophet Isaiah when he said that God's ways are not our ways. And we see that so clearly in this beautiful scene of the birth of Jesus Christ and who God wanted there. I want to start by reading Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, and then I'll go over and I'll read Luke chapter 2, verses 8 through 20. It says in chapter 2, verse 1 of Matthew, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and we've come to worship him.' Now when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, 'In Bethlehem of Judea. For so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.' Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, 'Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him.' And after listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. And then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh." Jump with me to Luke chapter 2, verse 8. "And in the same region there were shepherds out in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were filled with great fear. And the angel said to them, 'Fear not, for behold, I bring good news of great joy that will be for all people. For unto you this is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be a sign for you. You will find a baby wrapped in swaddling cloths and lying in a manger." And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among those whom he is pleased." When the angels went away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go over to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us." And they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in a manger. And when they saw it, they made known the saying that had been told them according to the child. And all who heard it wondered at what the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured up all these things, pondering them in his heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all that they had seen and heard, as it had been told them. Let's stop there in verse 20. As far as invitations go, this is the kind we want. This one right here. Did you notice the difference? Because there is a difference. There's a difference in how the wise men or the magi received word, and there's a difference in how the shepherds received word. And I would imagine that if you and I are going to have any kind of a correspondence with God, I would think that this one that the shepherds got would be the one that we would want. Because if you think, this invitation is pretty remarkable. I mean, Jesus literally, when God is filling out the please RSVP card, he is literally putting everything they need to know. The who, the what, the where, and the when. I mean, all of those things that are on our invitations are filled out here. The angel comes in glorious fashion, a glory that hadn't been seen for 400 years. The silent years are now over, and God comes busting into the scene to announce the birth, the foretold birth of his Son, the Savior of the world. This is huge news. And God, in this dramatic fashion, has this angelic messenger announce it in the middle of a field. Now, that's not how you and I would have done it. I'm quite sure of it. I mean, you and I are bombarded all of the time on Facebook about the birth of children, right? We get to see their pictures, both after birth and before birth. We know their gender before they do. I mean, we love to announce. We love to make sure everybody knows. And I understand that, but think about this. The biggest event in human history. And God, who has all power to do anything that he wants, chooses to send an angel to a field. A field with shepherds and sheep. You can't look at this story and say that God did not want them there, because he did. Without any question, God sent that angel to that field to speak to those shepherds on that night. God wanted them there. Doesn't make sense to us. We would have thought that the announcement of the birth of the Son of God, the King of the Jews and the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the greatest event in human history, we would have thought that God would have posted angels on all four corners of the earth. We would have thought that God would have at least gone to the King of the Jews at that time, or the rulers or the authorities. We would have thought that there would have been a line of political powers lined up to see this. We would have thought that all of the religious leaders, starting with the high priest and then the priests and then the scribes, that they would have all been lined up because they had been welcomed. No, that's not what happened. The political elite, those of high-ranking religious authority, they were not invited. God did not invite them in the way that he invited the shepherds. Isn't that weird? You and I have probably, mostly because of the way they have been portrayed in many of the nativity stories, we have come to love. We have an endearing relationship with the shepherds in the stories. But back in that time, people weren't endeared to them. You see, they were considered a little bit of outcasts. They were considered outcasts religiously because their job of commitment and caring for their sheep kept them out of a lot of the religious exercises and practices of the day. They were also social outcasts because they were a pretty rough bunch of guys. And they stunk. They slept outside with their sheep. If you think about it, God handpicked people to be at this huge event that nobody else would have chosen to be there. Everybody else would have overlooked. Nobody would have thought to bring the shepherds. And why? Why? There is a shroud over the reason. God just tells us that He did it. He doesn't tell us why He did it. So I guess we're left to speculate, right? And what we know of God, it shouldn't surprise us that He would have a special invitation for the outcast. It shouldn't surprise us that God, who loves those who are marginalized. It shouldn't surprise us that God, who loves those who are kicked out. It shouldn't surprise us at all that God would have said, you know what, I want to reserve the front row seat for those guys. I want to reserve the front row seat for the ones that haven't been able to go and observe religiously all the things that the others. I want to reserve this spot for those who have been looked down upon by their society. I want to reserve this spot for the guys that stink. Because my son stinks too. He's born in a barn after all. Laid in a manger full of straw. Can't help but think that there's got to be another reason that God would have said, I want those shepherds there. One of God's favorite terms for Himself and for His Son Jesus is shepherd. Jesus, throughout the Gospel of John, refers to Himself as the Good Shepherd. Peter refers to Jesus as the Great Shepherd. Jesus looked at those men who cared for their sheep, who were committed to their sheep, who were courageous in the face of enemies of the sheep. And He said, that's me. I want those guys there. They represent me. They care for, they tend to, they feed, they protect. That's what Jesus did. When we look upon closer observation, it shouldn't surprise us that God got it right. The guys out that nobody else would have invited, God said, I want this one to go to them. You know the angels. You know when God said, I want you to go outside of Bethlehem to that little field, and I want you to show up in grand fashion, and I want you to knock their socks off with your glory. I want you to invite them to the birth of my son. The angels would not be disobedient, but you know there had to be this little thought, right? There? Yes, there. And I'm so glad He did, aren't you? You might be like these shepherds. In the sense you may be an outcast. You may stink, I don't know. But you may be like these shepherds in another way as well. And that may be this, in that your life has been one of a very grand invitation. And what I mean by that is you may have been raised in a home where Jesus was honored. You may have been raised in a home where faithfulness was modeled. You may have been raised in a home with parents that loved you, nurtured you in the faith, prayed for you before you were born. You may have come to this place this morning having been carried on the shoulders of faithful men and women. So when that time came and you heard about Jesus, there had already been a great foundation laid. There had already been much information that you've been able to gather over your years because of the faithfulness of men or women or Sunday school teachers or grandparents or aunts or uncles or deacons down through the generations. That may be you. So when that invitation came, yeah, absolutely. I understand what the invitation is. I understand who Jesus is. And God used all of that information you had and brought you to the place where you were born again. That may be you. But I would probably imagine that for a fair amount of people in this worship center this morning, that may not be the case. You may be able to relate more, not to the fantastic invitation, but to number 2, the faint invitation. And that's found back in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 2. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. The wise men of Matthew's account have perplexed scholars and theologians all through the centuries. There are many questions we have. Not a lot of information is really given about them except that they're wise men or magi. We believe that they're from Persia and they come rolling into Jerusalem because they're following a star. Now that's their own testimony. They're following a star and they know that that star is associated with the birth of the King of the Jews. Now, we have so much more that we don't know, but we know they're following something and they know why they're following it. Now, we don't know if that star that they're talking about is some once-in-a-lifetime kind of constellation of planets and conglomeration of heavenly bodies that seems to form and lead them, as some have believed down through the centuries. Some others believe that this was quite possibly some special heavenly being, an angel or the presence of God in some way up in the sky that was leading those wise men from Persia back to the west to Jerusalem. We don't know. I tend to believe that it's the latter. I tend to believe that star that they saw was indeed some type of an angel or some other heavenly body that was guiding them there, because you'll know that it was there and then it goes away and then it comes back after they leave Herod and then it leads them right over the house to where the child is. And to me, I look at that and I see the story of these wise men having traveled so far, ready to worship this king, bringing him gifts that are worthy of a king. And then on the other side, you've got shepherds just outside of the area of birth, just outside of ground zero, and they've got a whole angelic choir. How different are these two? One of them has all of this light, and all they have to do is say, yes, we'll go. You know, it'd be really weird if the shepherds didn't go. I mean, really. They knew what was going on, where it was happening, what was taking place, and when. Literally, God gave them the address. It would have been weird if they didn't go. But then on the other side, you've got Gentiles traveling hundreds of miles, we believe, using a spot in the sky as their guide. One had so much light. The other had a speck. That may be you. You may not have resonated with the shepherds. You might resonate with the wise men. You grew up distant from God. Maybe your family grew up distant from God. Maybe you didn't have the best role models. Nobody around you being an example. Maybe there wasn't anybody that was instilling in you the truth of Scripture. Maybe there wasn't anybody nurturing you in the love of God. Maybe you didn't have anybody in your life modeling for you what it was to be a faithful follower of Christ. And much like those wise men, all you had was this little speck, a little bit of hope, a little bit of truth. Maybe it was that one time you heard the gospel, the good news. Jesus came to die for our sins. He came to earth so we could go to heaven. He came to take our place so that He would receive the punishment that we deserve. And by placing our faith and trust in Him, we can have eternal life. And you heard that one little speck, that one little truth, that one little opportunity, and it guided you to Jesus, that one little invitation. And you don't have all of this glorious light to live up to, just that one little moment. Did you notice that they come and they realize, they know that the King of the Jews has been born, and they've been following this light, and they're filled with great joy. Did you notice that term great joy is found in both the shepherds and the wise men? Both of them. Because they responded to the invitation. They understood, they heard, they believed, and they went and they followed until they arrived. And they were filled with great joy. It was a fantastic invitation. There was a faint invitation. Right now, we got a real interesting guest list, don't we? Stinky shepherds and royalty from another country. The third was a forfeited invitation. If you look in Matthew chapter 2, the Magi, probably with their caravan of camels and gifts that they come, all of their attendants and assistants, all of their gear and all of their garb, making this caravan down Main Street, Jerusalem, and stopping at the palace. No doubt this caused a stir in Jerusalem that this night there would be such a caravan of such royal and prestigious people coming into their town, and they go right down to the high priest's palace and they want to know, where is the king going to be born? You know what Herod does? King Herod is first troubled because he is known as a king, and yet now he hears that there's another king that is to be born, and this jealous, vengeful king can't handle the news that he's sitting on someone else's throne. So what does he do? This is very telling. King Herod turns to the scribes and says, "Tell me, where's the King of the Jews supposed to be born?" So what do? Or more like this. It was me reading a scroll. My memory is not on point. Here's what they say. The prophet said he's supposed to be born in Bethlehem. Think about this. Herod has the testimony of people that have traveled hundreds of miles and are convinced the King of the Jews has been born. And then he has all of the proof and evidence of the prophecies of Scripture that said, yeah, he's supposed to be born in Jerusalem. Herod had the who, the what, the when, and the where, and never went. Never went. For whatever reason, he didn't go. Now, don't get me wrong, knowing what we know about Herod, knowing what he does later, he would have tried to kill Jesus had he seen him. But you know what? None of the scribes go. There's no record of them going. They're not in any of our nativity scenes, are they? The high priest didn't even go. I mean, with news that big that the King of the Jews has been born, these men have been coming from now hundreds of miles, and Magi, and they're going to go see him, and the prophecies say he's going to be born in Bethlehem. Don't you think that word would have gone at least to the high priest to get out there? None of them go. They forfeited that decision. They forfeited an opportunity. Isn't it interesting that the ones who had such little light went, and the ones who had so much didn't? They missed Jesus. They missed him. Let me ask you a really quick question. I want us to just think about this for a moment. What are we doing with all that we have? What are we doing with the light that we've been given? The who, what, where's, whens. I know this because I also used to sit in pews while my preacher was preaching. And I also know that when it would come time and God was working in my heart about stepping up to a level of commitment or repenting of a sin or committing maybe to a greater level of my walk with Christ or surrendering to the call on my life, I know because I sat there that I would often say, well, I'll do it next week. I'll do it next month. I'll do it when I get out of school. And maybe in our life, as God is inviting us to know His Son as our personal Lord and Savior, that's the first step. And once we know Him as our Lord and Savior, God doesn't stop on the invitation. He's always inviting us to a closer, more intimate, more faithful, more committed walk with Jesus. It's a relationship. And I know that we're tempted when we hear of this invitation to put it off. To say, you know what, I'll do it when the thing changes at my job. I'll do it when my calendar clears out a little bit. I'll do it when I know a little bit more about the Lord. I'll do it when this next season of life comes. Listen, please. There's something very dangerous about that type of thinking. It's hugely disastrous. It can be. When you are saying, I will respond to God's invitation at a future date when things are more favorable for me, you are assuming that you are always going to be as sensitive to God as you are right now. That's not always the case. Just because you are sensitive to God's invitation, just because you may say in your heart, you know what, I know that I have never trusted Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I've got this opportunity. I have heard of His salvation. I have heard of His redemption for me. And you may say in your heart, I'm not doing it right now. I'll do it next week. I don't want to do it on Christmas. People won't understand. I'll do it next. You are assuming that you're going to be as sensitive next week as you are right now, and that is not the case. You have no idea how our hearts can be hardened. You have no idea how the winds of despair can sweep across your heart. You have no idea what stands between you and next week that's hidden from your eyes. Herod never saw Jesus. This Herod didn't. You know why? He died. He wanted to kill, and he did kill many children trying to kill Jesus. God warned Joseph in the night by a dream to get out and get his family down to Egypt and stay there until I tell you to come back. And Joseph did it. Joseph got word when he could come back because God said, you can come back now. Herod is dead. The ones who had a lot of light lived up to it. They went and saw Jesus. They left rejoicing and telling other people what they saw. Those who had a little bit of light, a spot in the sky, lived up to it. They went and found Jesus. They rejoiced with an exceeding great joy, and they were obedient to God. When God told them, don't go back to Herod, you go back home a different way, they were obedient to God. When you and I encounter God, our life changes. We are rejoicing. We're telling other people about what has happened, and we're walking in obedience to His will and to His word. But the third one never went, never lived up to all that light, and for all eternity, we'll be able to roll that scene that you and I have read. We'll be able to roll it back across his mind forever and ever and ever. I knew so much, but did nothing with what I knew. Let me end with this as Alex comes forward, comes up here to play for us. If you were to ask those shepherds if they were missing anything in their life before Jesus, they probably would have said no. Everything would have been probably just fine. If you'd have gone to the wise men before they saw the star and you'd asked them, is anything missing out of your life? They probably would have said, well, no. You see, they wouldn't even have known what they were missing until they experienced it. They wouldn't even have known that their life was lacking this incredible joy of having met the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now, there are some of you that may say in your heart today, you may know for sure your life is missing something. It's missing a piece, God-shaped piece in your life, and it's not right, and you know it. I promise you, that piece is Jesus. The missing piece is Christ. He is the only one who can fill that eternal void in your heart. There may be others that say, I don't really know that I'm missing something, but I realize who Jesus is. And today, I believe it to be true. And from your heart to God's heart, to be honest with Him about where you are, to hear that invitation that we have a God who says in Matthew 11:28, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. We have a God who does not hide Himself, as Isaiah says. We have a God who all around us is visible. Some people can't see God when they look around. Others can't not see God when they look around. Today, will you respond, however much or however little light you've been given, to the truth that for God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. You will seek me and you will find me. Jeremiah 29:13. You will seek me and you will find me when you seek me with all of your heart.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to our podcast at First Baptist Joplin. If you are interested in coming and worshiping with us live, we would love for you to come at 9 and 10:30 on Sunday mornings.